Hey everybody, we are back. We are pumped to welcome our third Fantasy Wolf in the ongoing Fantasy Wolves segment, and that, of course, is Andrew Erickson of the Gridiron Experts, a guy who comes very highly recommended from our first ever Fantasy Wolf, Mitchell Renz. And if Mitch didn't have a load of credibility before, which he did, he has a load more now because I understand he kicked the shit out of the Wolf in a wing eating contest. Not too long ago. He was talking a bunch. It seemed, through the messages you guys were having, he definitely liked talking fantasy football and he liked coming on the podcast, but he seemed way, way, way more concerned about getting you into the wing eating arena.
And he absolutely thrashed me. It was like 54 wings I think he took down. I got like 46, which is a shitload of wings, but
that's way more than that.
I had no hope. I don't know, Andrew, have you ever eaten wings with Mitch before?
No, I've never eaten wings with Mitch before. I know that he does talk a lot of game when he comes to his eating abilities. I remember when I first met him, he was like, "Yeah, I used to be a competitive eater."
Oh, really?
What? He's like, "Yeah, basically he would just go up and challenge people and be like, I bet I can eat more than you." And he's pretty good at it.
This is sick pleasure of just showing off his eating abilities against random people. Apparently, that's the only reason he friended me, is just so he could thrash me and feel better about himself.
I know.
Thanks, Mitch.
And I know we're talking about Mitch a lot when you're the guest on the show. That makes me want to have him back on the show again, just to talk about his former life as a competitive eater. That's fantastic. That's brutal. Anyway, Andrew, thanks for coming on the show. Like I said, you come very highly recommended, so we're thrilled to welcome you to the Fantasy Wolves. I guess you'd call it a fraternity, community. What do we call it, Wolf?
The Wolf Pack, baby.
Okay, the Wolf Pack. All right, welcome.
Welcome
to the Wolf Pack. All right, you ready to get into this thing?
Yeah, let's get it started.
All right, go ahead, Resident Wolf.
Alrighty, so just quickly start by letting our listeners know who you are and why should they trust you.
All right, so first off, like I said, like you guys introduced me, so I'm Andrew Erickson. I'm from the Gridiron Experts. I come highly recommended from my friend Mitch. Mitch is the one that kind of got me into the gig of Gridiron Experts, so I know that he set that bar high for me, and he's actually taught me a lot of different things. But I think that I'm starting to branch off a little bit on my own, which is good. But the reason why listeners should trust me is I do a lot of different things when it comes to, thinking outside the box. I don't always try to, necessarily go with the pack. I'm not afraid to take the minority opinion on a take. I'm not afraid to, say something about a player that maybe is totally against the consensus. And you kind of get you can get mocked. You can kind of get you get ripped on Twitter for some of your takes, or especially if you put stuff on Reddit, you just get destroyed.
Reddit's brutal.
On Reddit, some of the worst people you'll ever see.
Reddit is, Reddit, you'll just get your soul ripped out of anything you put.
Absolutely.
But, and I value feedback, so I'm never going to, come at somebody and say oh, this is the right thing. I'm always going to, ask questions, and I'm not always going to agree with you on a certain thing. We all have different opinions, but, I'm going to have my opinion with my take and facts to back it up. Sometimes I think about something and I have a gut feeling about something, but then, I always try to find some type of numbers that, back it up. Kind of another thing that I do that's kind of unique is I kind of try to go away from the player profiling a lot in articles I write. That's something that's, kind of a lot of people kind of tend to do. So a couple of things I'm working on right now is, looking at, consistency in teams, not as so much for the players themselves. Looking at, okay, maybe we should be focusing on drafting players on certain teams. Maybe it's the teams that are really the more consistent ones that consistently produce fantasy players. And it's not so much the players themselves, but it's the teams that they're on. Teams like the Packers, teams like the Patriots, the Saints, those teams. If you just draft players on those teams that score a lot of points, you just get fantasy production just right away. Another thing I'm looking at is looking at preseason stats and basically being is this something that we can use? Is this relevant at all? You look at a guy like Robbie Anderson, who had a really big preseason, the previous preseason, and, he didn't really do much most of the season for the Jets, but, towards the end of the year, he was that Jets player that was, the most fantasy relevant.
Are you concerned by the 5 interception practice for Blake Bortles? If we're
Wait,
talking,
say that again?
Are you concerned about the 5 interceptions that Blake Bortles threw in practice the other day? That like stuff like that? Are you looking at stuff like that, or were you already far off the Bortles train that it doesn't even matter?
Yeah, I mean that's just Blake being Blake, doing his thing, throwing his 5 interceptions. I would expect nothing less from him. I mean, I think that means he's right on point from where his training has brought him.
All right, that's
5 interceptions.
That's fair. I was sorry. I just wanted to throw that in because I consider that even the step before preseason. The Wolf has gone all in on guys like Bortles before because of the preseason, and so I'm just trying to throw a little shade at the Wolf for fun. But
preseason is tricky, but it is. You've kind of already covered our usual third questions, which is what makes you a Wolf. What's like your unique approaches, and I really like that whole team mindset. Something we've been doing actually this whole off season is what we call team previews, and we've been just so we really fully understand the teams. We've been bringing in beat writers from all over the place to get a better sense of how is the Bucs offense evolving, how is the Saints, what's their number one target going to be this year, things like that. So we totally are with you there. Where yes, player profiles are important, but having a deep understanding of the scheme and the surrounding talent, and everything about a team gives you a much more holistic look at that than individual guy you're drafting. So we're fully with you there. We love the way you're approaching it. Nat, why do you?
Right, but the real reason people are tuning in is that they want to know his answer to the hypothetical. And
exactly.
the hypothetical is as follows. What's your least favorite football team? Or if you want to get even more specific, who's your least favorite football player, Andrew?
My least favorite football team
or player
is probably the Jets. I'm not a huge.
Oh, dumping on the Jets. What's to hate about the Jets? Anyway.
They're disgusting.
Right. Yeah, they're terrible. All right. So
I don't know. Or actually, probably the Jets or the Giants.
Okay, fair enough. So the first option in the hypothetical is you wake up tomorrow morning and you declare yourself for the rest of your life a Jets or Giants or both fan. You say, I'm all in on the New York football teams. I think they're great. I think the Jets are really well run. I think their ownership, their coaching, their players. I think Ryan Fitzpatrick is an icon. Or at least he was when he was on the Jets. And this is what you put out on Twitter. You have a news conference, and every article and every conversation you have in a bar for the rest of your life has to be completely pro-Jets. That's option number one. Option number two is you're going to go across the middle, like on a post play, and wearing only for protection, like one of those leather 1930s football helmets without the face mask. And so a quarterback's going to loft kind of a lazy pass across the middle. You're going to go up and catch it, and 2001 Ray Lewis is going to come across the middle and plow you one time. One time.
One time. Am I guaranteed to live? Or
No, and that's so funny. That's the first question that our last Wolf asked. He said, am I guaranteed to survive? And I'm like, of course not. There's no guarantees in this.
Oh, man.
No, I mean, like you might survive.
I might survive.
You might not.
I honestly, I'll take. See, like I'm thinking also, like maybe it seems like the hit maybe will be like that'll be a short-term pain, but it's probably not short-term because that could definitely that one hit from Ray Lewis could have some long-lasting effects on my brain.
Oh, I mean, you're wearing a leather football helmet with no mask. I mean, you're not getting any protection there. That's just for the visual aspect.
I guess I'm going to be a Jets fan then. Like, I'm not going to risk my, like if I lose my brain, then, I won't be able to watch football anymore. I won't be able to absorb anything. I won't be able to do this or that. So I guess, hey, being a Jets fan, at least I still get to watch football and be a fan of the game still.
And to be fair, like if you took a head injury like that, there's at least a possibility like you might get confused to the point where you might become a Jets fan anyway. So you might as well just become a Jets fan without the hit.
Exactly. Just subtract the whole part about taking. But then you do have the credit of saying that you did take one over the middle from Ray Lewis.
Right. And that you were in traction for like 18 months. Anyway, just so you know, the Wolves, the experts, the beat writers we've asked, they're pretty much split down the middle. So you're in good company, whichever one you chose. Just for the record, I would have chosen what you chose. So
we should go back and run the numbers because it is pretty close to 50-50.
I feel like we've asked like 13 people, and I think it's like 7-6 or 8-5 or something like that. So
right, exactly.
Anyway, that's the question everyone's tuning in for. But Wolf, why don't you get in with the actual fantasy?
Yeah, let's do it. So we call this next part the Wolf's Den, where I pick out three people who were both, different from the experts. The whole Wolf's thing about we're different, like you mentioned, you're not scared to go against the pack. So I look and see who are you going against the pack on that I also am with you. And then we'll kind of go into some disagrees as well and have a little debate after that. But we'll start with the agrees, and I think you mentioned, and I'm also very high on this guy. He's my 4th ranked RB, is Jay Ajayi. After the big three, that's my next guy. And you said you're also equally high on him. What do you love about Jay Ajayi this year?
So I like him because the way that I think that the Miami Dolphins offense is trending towards, last year we kind of saw Jay Ajayi come out and emerge as that, running back that would put the team on his back. He had all those games where he rushed for 200 yards. Right. And that was making the Dolphins win. I mean, the Dolphins made the playoffs last year with, Ryan Tannehill got hurt. And I just think that they've kind of found a way to win games running the football. I don't think that they are an offense that, I know that Adam Gase is there. And he was prolific, with the Peyton Manning offense, but he also wants to win. And last year, winning was going through Jay Ajayi and running the football. And I think with a quarterback like Ryan Tannehill, that's the best method for the Dolphins to win. And even though we want all the NFL teams to win for our fantasy teams, they want to win for themselves. So they're going to do what it takes to win the football game, which is why I like Jay Ajayi to, I think he's going to get tons of carries, and I think he's going to get tons of work.
Yeah, I think there's actually a stat that backs it up. I don't know the exact number off the top of my head, but I know in games where he got 18 to 20 carries or something like that, they were 5-1. There's a good stat out there. I wish I had it right off the top of my head, but there is one where their winning percentage is 80% when Ajayi had 20 or more carries. They're also talking about adding the receiving work to the game, that he's improved, threefold as a receiver. So not just the carries, but the receptions coming. I know he's today he got a little dinged up in practice and was, they getting evaluated for a concussion already. So it's too bad that already there's little things popping up, but overall it doesn't worry me. Obviously it's better to happen in practice. Every other report was that he's flying around, banging people, trucking people in camp. So I'm with you. I love the J train. For me, it's more of a debate, not who's the 4th running back. To me, he's clearly my 4th running back. It's, do I take him over Evans? Do I put him above that tier of receivers? I haven't.
That goes way more to draft strategy and what you think, how you think it makes sense to build your team, as opposed. I mean, he's not as elite a running back as Mike Evans is a receiver, but given the lack of depth at running back, he might make sense to pick over someone like Evans.
Right. If he's the next David Johnson and he's got that upside to be that guy,
he's
that late first rounder that gets 400 touches. And no one likes David Johnson more than me.
Listen.
So, absolutely. So
we can move on to the next one. I know you guys also agree on Marcus Mariota. I want to say I would caution you to put too much stock into the, stat every time he carries, if he carries 20 times, they're 5-1, because I believe that where you're at in the game, that has major implications as far as whether you're getting carries at the end of the game or not. I always feel like stats like that are misleading.
It's true. Game flow, they might get down early and then the carries have to. Yeah, of course, it's tough. But if they're winning because they're getting the ball, they're going to try that. That's going to be their early game plan at least, And
although,
feed the guy,
and I want to be clear, I'm high on him also. He's my RB4 as well. All right, a guy that you guys agree on, Marcus Mariota. You both think he's the real deal. I'm a little skeptical. Why don't you guys convince me? Go ahead, Andrew.
I mean, he's just super efficient. The way that, if you look at his stats, they still are in a run first approach with, the smash mouth, exotic smash mouth football in Tennessee. But he's just efficient. He has, I believe, the 2nd best red zone touchdown efficiency besides Aaron Rodgers. And anytime you have a statistic that's comparing you to Aaron Rodgers, it's going to open up some eyes. And that's the thing. He doesn't turn the ball over. And he has running ability. He's just, and then, they're adding the weapons. Like last year, he had Rashard Matthews as his number 1 receiver. So now you're adding guys like Eric Decker. You're adding a top 5 wide receiver. I mean, I just feel like the sky's the limit with what his ability is. I do like him a lot. But we do have to always remember, though, that, they do run the ball a lot in Tennessee. So it really is about efficiency and Mariota being efficient because, he's not necessarily going to get, he's going to drop back to throw 50 times a game. Like, that's not, really a logical thing that's going to happen. But just the way that he can, make plays with, such, not a super amount of volume, he's still able to be so efficient. I just like him, and I like where he's projecting to go.
Wolf, where do you have him ranked? What quarterback do you have him as, Wolf?
He's my personal, I believe, QB7. I have him over Andrew Luck, which I know a lot of people think is insane, but I have Mariota up at 7, only under, I think right under Derek Carr is my 5 or 6. So I'm very high on him too. I think that efficiency stat's the one I was hoping you drop, which I really like, especially like you mentioned, the added weapons there. Just if you combine his talent that he was doing last year, yes, it is run heavy. You mentioned that, but I think that helps with the efficiency because defenses can't, drop back the safeties. They have to stack the box, and then Mariota makes him pay. Plus, he's got that mobility for himself. I heard he was shedding some pounds this offseason. So, he also gets the running game points. So I'm a huge Mariota guy. I think this is definitely the best cast he's had to work with. So if he does carry over that efficiency this year, that's a really good stat to point out. So I'm excited about that. And just combined with him, you said you like Eric Decker too a lot, right, for the Titans?
Yeah, I like Eric Decker. I think, you kind of saw last year Mariota kind of zoned in on Rashard Matthews in the red zone, becoming his red zone guy. I mean, Rashard Matthews was catching the touchdown it seemed like every single week. Either touchdown or 80 yards receiving or something like that.
10 of the last games he had, I think it was 10 of the last 12 games he scored double-digit PPR or double-digit half PPR points. He was on an unbelievable pace. It was great.
Yeah, exactly. He was super consistent, and those stat lines just remind me so much of Eric Decker, a guy he's either going to put up. I remember one season he had 80 yards in every game or a touchdown in every game. Eric Decker's a huge guy in the red zone. He's always been like that. He's always been a guy that's caught touchdowns. I think that having him in the wideout group for Mariota, I think that Mariota is going to connect with him a lot in the red zone. I think that he's going to be a huge touchdown guy for Marcus.
What would you say is over-under for touchdowns at?
For Eric Decker?
Yeah.
Yeah, over-under 9.5.
I'll take double digits. I'll give him 10.
Yeah, I'd give him 10 too.
All right,
he has the most. It's since 2012. I think there's only Dez Bryant, Demaryius Thomas, and maybe one other name that have more touchdowns than him since 2012, and that includes him missing 13 games last year. So, yeah, he's an absolute red zone beast. Someone who's actually kind of the opposite of that is a guy that we're both lower on is Jarvis Landry. I feel like he's just allergic to the end zone. What do you not like about Jarvis Landry this year?
Yeah, so it kind of goes with, the fact that I like Jay. We all talk about guys, and the thing is, you have to remember, when you're statting out a team, you can't like everyone on the team. It's really hard for, especially a team like the Dolphins to, carry so many fantasy relevant players where they're going to be the tops at their positions. So it's if you really like the receivers of the Dolphins, and you probably don't like Jay as much. And then the vice versa. So I really like Jay, which is why, I'm not a huge Jarvis Landry guy. If you look at his stats, kind of going back to what we were looking at with Jay, towards the end of the season, I believe that Jarvis Landry's targets went from over 10 targets a game from weeks 1 through 5 to then less than 7 targets a game. So his targets were going down because they were running the football. That short passing game that Ryan Tannehill had incorporated where he would just kind of dump it off to Jarvis Landry on those screens, those were becoming running plays. They were just handing the ball off to Jay, which I think is going to happen again. I don't necessarily think that, Landry's going to be that PPR machine he's been in the past. I think people just see his name and think, oh, PPR machine. I still think Jarvis Landry's an amazingly talented player. He can make plays where he can break tackles and take a slant to the house, similar to Odell Beckham. But I just don't think that he, like you said, he is allergic to the end zone. He doesn't score a lot. And I think that his volume is going to go down a little bit because of the emergence of Jay.
Yeah, actually, the stat you were just talking about, I wrote about this in our market guide the other day. So he dropped from going from 9.7 targets per contest in 2015 to only 6.2 for the second half once they had Jay Ajayi, the guy, and only had caught more than 5 passes in just 2 games in the second half of 2016. So, yeah, definitely saw that. I'm with you, too, that offensive shift. I see it carrying over this year and similar things where it's just not enough work for a guy like Landry that's just depended on volume for so long. So 100% with you there.
All right,
we're gonna now
enough
move
of
to
this.
some
Enough of this. Enough of this. It's time for the showdown. All right,
It's
so
time for the showdown.
right,
I gave you a few names from your rankings that I definitely disagreed with, and you chose these three. We'll start with Jameis Winston, a guy that you said you're definitely lower on than the regular experts. Why is that?
Yes. So Jameis Winston, when he, after the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, drafted O.J. Howard and Deshaun, and then they got Deshaun Jackson free agency, Jameis Winston was blowing up everywhere. I saw tweets saying he would be, MVP Jameis Winston. And I just, I wasn't sure about it. I had him on my fantasy team last year, so I did watch a lot of his games. And he disappointed me, often, every single time I would play him. I remember he had a juicy playoff schedule last year, and I was so
Saints
looking forward
twice.
to it.
I remember it. Yep.
Yeah, it was oh man, this is the best. He's in there. I'm gonna lock him in. I'm locked and loaded for the playoffs, and he just put up duds, and it was confusing, and it was why is this happening? So I kind of looked at more about his stats, and I started watching a little bit of just his game film, and he just is sometimes erratic. He looks like Eli Manning sometimes. He'll throw the ball. His deep ball accuracy is very concerning. So I was looking, when I wrote an article on him, I looked at his accurate percentage on deep throws. 46.6% on throws over 16 yards down the field. 32.8% on throws over 20 yards down the field. So those ranked 22nd and 28th respectively overall in the league last year. And this was despite the fact that he had the most attempts of any quarterback down the field, of pass attempts of any quarterback in 2016. So, yes, he's going to have the volume. But my concern is that, even though Deshaun Jackson's going to be running out there, he's going to be running deep, I'm not so sure that Winston's going to be able to get him the ball. I think what concerns me about him is running attempts. Tampa Bay runs the ball a lot. They were averaging around 25 carries per game last year. And I'm just concerned that, with the running game and then problems with the offensive line, I just don't think that, Winston's going to have time to read the pocket, read the defense and make throws down the field. I'm just concerned about that. And I just think that with so many other quarterbacks you can get later, a guy like Tyrod Taylor, who, he has that running ability and you can get him so much later. I wouldn't be surprised if Tyrod Taylor finishes ahead of Jameis Winston. That wouldn't shock me at all. So that's kind of my take on Winston. I just don't see him really, evolving. He's thrown the third most interceptions since entering the league, behind Rivers and Eli Manning. I just don't necessarily see him, making that next step.
Wolf.
Alrighty, fair. So I think you brought up some really interesting stats that kind of help paint the picture of Dirk Cutter's offense, which they is a very run-heavy scheme to set up that they call it the four verticals, the play action scheme. We talked about a Bucks writer about their system. So they do love to run the ball, but then also, like you mentioned, they took the most deep ball attempts. They run the ball to set up the play action and get that deep ball going. So I do love the offensive scheme. That's one thing we always try to bring up is the chunk plays could be there, the big plays. But I think what really was killing him is they didn't have the talent to execute that scheme last year. And I know you mentioned they added Deshaun Jackson, O.J. Howard. I mean, Deshaun Jackson led the league in yards per catch last year, has never been under 15 yards per carry in 8 straight seasons. Got to be one of the best deep ball threats in the league. I mean, who was his options last year? Obviously, Mike Evans is a monster, but he's chucking him in triple coverage. Adam Humphries is the second option. I mean, that was just vomit-inducing. So, I just think this was kind of a combination. This is going to be a big year for Winston because he doesn't have the excuses now. That's the excuse for why he wasn't as good as he could have been last year, despite taking all the deep shots and whatnot. I'm giving him that pass and saying he didn't have the talent there to execute it because Cameron Brate was his second best target last year. I mean, Cameron Brate, no offense, is Cameron Brate. He's from Harvard. It's not Deshaun Jackson, the second best deep threat, in the game right now. So if he doesn't execute this year, then I think it's clear, yes, Winston isn't taking that next step. He's not a great talent. But this is the first time they've had the absolute weapons to execute it. I did see a stat because there is a lot being made about Winston's accuracy, and rightfully so, 46%, 23rd in the NFL, not good. But I saw this stat. So it's Kirk Cousins' pass attempts without Deshaun Jackson in the deep game and then with Deshaun Jackson. And it just kind of goes to highlight the difference it made. So Kirk Cousins only completed 19 of 52 passes for 36.5%. 461 yards and 1 TD for a 59.9 quarterback rating, whereas when he had Deshaun Jackson in the lineup during those 2 years, it was 82 for 161. So his percentage jumped up all the way to 50.9. His passer rating went up to 106, so almost doubled. 16 TDs. Just it's one of those things. Did Kirk Cousins make Deshaun Jackson, or Deshaun Jackson make Kirk Cousins, particularly in the deep game? It seems to me like that type of weapon made a huge difference for Cousins. I'd love to see what it does for Winston, who's taking those deep attempts even more than Cousins does, and now he gets that weapon that clearly helped Cousins out a lot. I'm very intrigued by that, so we'll see. But that's my counter to that one. And you bring up all the good points that go with it, but if he doesn't make it, then I can side with you and say the talent's just not there. He doesn't have the excuses, and that's why I think he's going to ball out for, I think he's my QB9 right now. I'm a big Winston fan.
All right, well.
I mean, I do.
Go ahead, Andrew.
Oh, yeah, I mean, I will admit, though, a guy like Deshaun Jackson, I'm high on him. I'm not super high on the quarterback, but I know that Jackson's going to be getting tons of volume in that offense because, Winston throws it back with he's going to chuck it deep, and the receivers aren't affected by interceptions. Doesn't affect them at all.
That's true. That is very true. We did hear a cool stat, too, from Sycamore. Not a stat, but it's a storyline that in training camp, they've been putting Deshaun Jackson in the backfield and different things too. So I know we're supposed to be talking about Winston here, but just a little note I love to throw in whenever we hear about Deshaun Jackson, because I feel like nobody's really covered that one, is they're moving him all over the place. So he's going to be a serious weapon. I think he's very undervalued. So I'm with you there. I love Jackson, and I do think it's going to make – Winston's going to make his idiotic throws. That's him. He's a gunslinger. But you'd like to think year 3 takes that next step. He's been with Dirk Cutter his whole career, so he knows him. He's got that familiarity. They know the film. They know how to break it down together. I just think the weapons are finally there, that surrounding talent score. We do a stock rating system for all our players, and we break down their individual talent, their usage, their the scheme and the surrounding talent. I just think this is the perfect mix of that scheme and surrounding talent this year. The risk is definitely high. That's another factor we put in there. The inconsistency, the interceptions. But I think the weapons and the scheme are going to make just a beautiful marriage and really just let Dirk Cutter execute this vertical scheme that he loves, and Winston's going to sling it all over the place. We'll find out, though. Devontae Adams is another guy I'm very high on that you don't like as much as me. So what's your beef with Adams? Why don't you like him?
Well, here, how about you go first this time?
I don't have – so Winston was the one I had more stats and things ready. Adams is kind of more just – one, it's one of those guys I owned last year. I picked him off of the waiver wires. So when you have a guy and he just blows up for you, you have that special place in your heart for him. So this is more anecdotal than anything. But I just look at it. I know you talked earlier. You love – the explosive offenses, the ones that are putting up points every week. And I look at the Packers, and you're getting close to 30, 40, depending on what defense they're facing that week. Every single week, Rodgers is going to be throwing a couple touchdowns. And if you're getting the number 2 target in that system, that's worth a lot more to me than, a number 1 in obviously, Cleveland. That's the first one that comes to mind. That's obvious. But even a mediocre offense, I'll take Devontae Adams' number 2 target share with Aaron Rodgers than, your standard number 1 in a mediocre offense. He came on. It was one of those guys that's running a complete route tree. It wasn't just a deep ball guy. Rodgers had that trust in him on the back shoulder fades, on the timing routes. And obviously he had that horrible 2015. So, there is that risk of, does he go backwards? Does he keep moving forward? But then there's also, Jordy Nelson, a big injury risk himself, a guy that's older. What if Adams takes over the number 1 role there at some point this year? I just think there's a huge ceiling, and the floor is pretty sturdy. Obviously, there is the chance that he reverts back to 2015 form, but I just see it as a guy ascending. He was the wide receiver 12 last year, and he's going, around wide receiver 20 this year. I think it's a pretty good discount. I really like him.
Yeah, no, I think that you're spot on with what you're saying on some of those things. I just think that in terms of, someone you didn't mention, though, was Randall Cobb.
That's a good point.
You didn't really mention him, and he's coming back. So he's going to be involved in the offense again. So I think that he's someone you definitely don't want to overlook. I really think that, honestly, like if you put Randall Cobb and Devontae Adams receiver versus receiver, I think that Randall Cobb is a better wide receiver overall than Devontae Adams. Like when I look at Devontae Adams, he is a product of the Packers system. Like he flourishes because that he's in Green Bay. He plays in Green Bay. I think that if he was on another team, I think that he wouldn't be nearly as good. I think that Randall Cobb is a better wide receiver, and I think that if you look at just regression, Devontae Adams scored 14 touchdowns last year, double-digit, or I believe it was 4. I think it was 12. Regardless, it was double-digit touchdowns.
Yeah.
There's a high regression with double-digit touchdowns, especially when it's two teammates. If you go back a year before, you got Allen Robinson and Allen Hurns. They had double-digit touchdowns. Obviously, Blake Bortles from Aaron Rodgers is very different. But, the regressions, it's very hard to repeat double-digit touchdowns. Jordy Nelson has never repeated with double-digit touchdowns. So I just think that those touchdowns from Devontae Adams are definitely going to come down. I think Randall Cobb's are going to go up. He's going to be back. You have Martellus Bennett there taking more looks in the red zone. His is going to go up. Ty Montgomery, more involved in the offense as the full-time running back. He's going to get more looks. I just think that Devontae Adams is reliant on touchdowns, which is why he was so good last year. And I think that those are going to come down just because of regression. It happens with wide receivers. It's just so hard to repeat double-digit touchdowns. And we've seen it in the past where guys score double-digit touchdowns and then they fall back. So I think that a guy like Randall Cobb, especially for the price you can get Cobb at, Cobb has the same upside as Devontae Adams. Cobb could, Jordy Nelson goes down. Randall Cobb could get so many targets if one of those guys gets hurt. If he's in the offense, and he's a guy you can get in the 8th or 9th round in drafts, whereas Devontae Adams you got to take in the 4th round, where you're gonna it's kind of weird taking a second wide receiver player that early in the 4th round. Even a guy like Crabtree you can get a little bit later, but it just concerns me that I really project regression for him, and I think that Cobb is definitely going to be much more involved in the offense.
Yeah, Cobb's a good name to bring up, too, because they have been saying a lot about getting him back involved, that he wasn't fully healthy last year and he had to fade. And then obviously in the playoffs, Cobb blew back up once he was fully back to health. So that is definitely a good point to consider with him. And I know we talked to the NFL talking heads last week, and they were big into this whole, same upside, different, or I forget the exact thing, but it was like,
same player,
different round type of thing they would say. And maybe Cobb does bring that type of upside for a significantly cheaper cost. I do love Adams as a physical talent. We'll see. There is a definitely touchdown regression there. But I think Cobb was a good person to bring up there for sure. And someone I might be a little too low on, so I got to check that. The last name you're going to have a little more tough time swaying me on is Jeremy Hill.
Well, I got to know before you guys start this, which one of you guys is high on Jeremy Hill?
Not me.
Okay. All right, good. I was going to say, this might be our last pod together, Wolf. If, I found out you're all in on Jeremy Hill, I might have to go find a different Wolf to follow around. Sell me on Jeremy Hill on anything aside from the
Jeremy
occasional
Hill.
Fall into the end zone,
All right, so I want to state before, high on Jeremy Hill doesn't mean I'm taking him as my RB1. I'm not thinking he's gonna this is his breakout year, but what I'm saying is he's been consistent. He's scored he's averaged 10 touchdowns the last 2 seasons, or 10.5 touchdowns. And he's the only running back in the NFL the last year that had over 200 carries and didn't fumble once. So what concerns me is, just kind of looking at the Bengals backfield, looking at Joe Mixon. Here comes a rookie, and what happens with rookies is they fumble. It's just, it's part of the transition into the NFL. And I think that there may be, a learning curve with that with Joe Mixon. I don't think that Marvin Lewis is just going to hand the keys over to Joe Mixon. Jeremy Hill has been the goal line back, and he's been pretty good at it. He hasn't been efficient in between, going from 20 to 20, but from 20 to the goal line, that's where he makes his bread and butter. Mixon could end up doing all the work, between the 20s, but, for that easy touchdown, for an easy flex play, you throw Jeremy Hill in there, you get a touchdown. Like, he's going to be still getting touchdowns. Jeremy Hill also doesn't get hurt. He's missed one game in 3 seasons. So you're not drafting a guy that's going to be a waste. And where you can get him super late in drafts because, people have seen him basically as garbage, And yes, he's been frustrating, but that's coming at like an expectation that he's going to break out. He's not going to break out. Like, we know this is the real Jeremy Hill. The real Jeremy Hill has stood up. Like, this is him. But he's a guy that's been consistent, and if you use him the right way, he can be a viable asset to a fantasy team. And that's not even showing, talking about Mixon. Mixon's hanging around with Pac-Man Jones as his life coach. So who knows how long Joe Mixon's going to even be on the team because he might get suspended because he's, Adam Jones is taking him under the wing, showing him what's up after he gets his 1-game suspension. So I just don't like, I'm just not so convinced that, Mixon's just going to automatically be the guy. And, if you can get a starting running back late in drafts, I think that Jeremy Hill's a guy you can target. So, if you go 0 RB, if that's your draft strategy, and you're looking for a running back late with starting potential, I think Jeremy Hill's a guy you can target.
So I think he'll definitely have that goal line role. That's going to be tough to argue. I think your stats are good there, double-digit TDs, and he could very realistically get close to 9, 10 TDs again this year. The thing that's tricky with guys like that, though, is if you don't get a touchdown out of him, he's not going to do anything for you.
You can't start guys like that.
It's so tough to know what week you're going to be able to depend on him because maybe he scores in 50% of the weeks, but the weeks he doesn't, maybe there's a very slight chance he takes over the starting running back role because Mixon gets in trouble or hurt or whatever it is. But by all accounts so far, he's kept his head on straight. I know early on he wasn't hanging with the right people, but since camp started, he's gotten in great shape. Everyone's saying he looks like a beast out there, that he's just cleared another whole level compared to the other 2 running backs. I personally love Mixon as a talent. Coming out just as a great receiver, great running back. Often got compared to David Johnson by draft scouts because of how big and explosive he is, but then still how soft of hands he had, how good route running he did. So Joe Mixon, I just love as just a completely better talent. I don't love everything about Joe Mixon's fantasy situation because of Jeremy Hill stealing his touchdowns and whatnot, but I don't see any situations where Hill's getting more than 30 yards a game because he's only going to be getting those carries in the 20s, where, yes, again, I agree with you, he's good there, but can you truly start the guy if you get 20 carries and he doesn't fall into the end zone that week, and then you only have two points out of your flex? Whereas where Hill goes, and it is late, the price is right, I guess, if you do want to try to roll those dice. But where he goes, I'm looking at guys like Joe Williams for San Fran, who maybe not right off the bat he'll be valuable, but halfway down the year maybe he takes over Kyle Shanahan's running back role and is your lead guy, and then you get a monster starter like Roy Halou a few years ago or whatever it is. I like to just kind of chase those ceilings, and where you have to take Hill for the maybe you get a touchdown, maybe you don't type of a play. There's just so many guys. Thomas Rawls, when Eddie Lacy's fat ass falls to the weight, and then now you got the Seattle running back. You know what I mean? I'd rather have that on my bench than the guy I can put in and maybe get a touchdown. But you're not going to get more than 10 points a week unless he scores 2, those random weeks where Hill has like 2 touchdowns. But if you predict that, good for you. If not, you're getting scred. So
you got to start in those weeks against when he's going to go off against the Browns. He's definitely got at least 2. He's got 2 games he can lock him in.
Nah,
right.
The Browns are going to give up more like 65-yard runs to Mixon.
Mixon, yeah.
Yeah. All right. With that said, I'm not convinced on Hill. Well, I mean, see, here's the thing. Well, this kind of goes against everything that you stand for, which is taking the guys at the end, like kind of the names that, are going to get you a couple points a week, but they're not going to, you have no chance of blowing up with them. And I feel like Jeremy Hill falls into that category completely. Just for the record, like maybe 3 years ago, I took Jeremy Hill with literally my first pick in the draft, like number 7 pick overall. And I will never forgive him. So no matter what data you threw at me, I would tell you you're wrong. With that said, let's get right into the no huddle offense.
Hurry up, no huddles.
Wolf, why don't you start us off?
So who should go number 1 overall?
David Johnson.
Agreed.
All right, who is the most undervalued quarterback in the draft?
Carson Palmer.
Who's the most undervalued running back?
Undervalued running back?
Yeah.
Jonathan Stewart.
Okay. Undervalued receiver.
Randall Cobb.
Undervalued tight end.
Undervalued tight end. I'd have to go with Kobe Fleener, easily.
All right.
Interesting. Okay. We'll do the same thing, but overvalued. So overvalued QB, running back, receiver, and tight end, would you say?
So overvalued, so quarterback, so Jameis Winston again. Go with him again. Running back, I'd say LaShawn McCoy.
Interesting.
I think that he's going too high at 4, to be totally honest. Wide receiver, Devontae Adams. So kind of, with the Green Bay theme.
haven't been swayed. Understand.
And then tight end, Travis Kelce. Very overvalued.
Love it. What early round draft pick, let's say like rounds 1 through 3, is going to ruin a bunch of people's fantasy seasons?
I would say, guys, I was thinking about this. I would say probably, I think Lamar Miller is a guy that's going to hurt a lot of people. I think that he's a guy that, he can't withstand getting the majority of the carries. He's not a guy that you can really take on, that running back role. By week 12, he's cooked. He's gone. Todd Gurley, he's just a ticking time bomb could just blow up in your face all over the place. Like, we all saw how good he was those first 4 games he played his rookie year, but since then he's been just nothing. Like, he hasn't been much of anything. And that 4-game sample size seems like it's so long ago. Todd Gurley, it's super. He's going to get the volume, but you don't know in that offense, just with Jared Goff at quarterback, if there's ever going to be lanes opened up for Todd Gurley to really, make an impact.
Right.
So I'd say those 2 running backs. I mean, honestly, running backs are probably the most, those are the scary guys to draft because, those are the guys that get hurt the most. And then a couple other running backs, I would say, Jordan Howard. He's another guy, that rookie running back that, breaks out, kind of like Jeremy Hill his rookie year. He broke out, and then the next couple of years he just fell off the scene, and it really hurt.
Right, and Todd Gurley. Howard's my pick for that too, actually. If you were asking me that one, Howard's the guy I always say for that. What about, let's go the opposite way. What mid-round pick is going to win titles?
So, back again, Randall Cobb. I'm a super advocate for Randall Cobb. I think that he's going to do some great things for the Packers. Mike Gillislee, even though, his draft stock has increased extraordinarily over the past couple weeks. He was going in the 9th round. I remember, and now he's going in the 4th round. Just because, if you're the goal line running back on the Patriots, you're just, it's gold, man. You're just gonna get so many end zone looks, and if that ends up being his role in the offense, he's gonna eat him up. He was so good last year. He was really efficient with the Bills, and I know some people are. I just don't see how Mike Gillislee can't. Unless the Patriots just pull a 360 and Rex Burkhead becomes the goal line running back, I just can't see Mike Gillislee not having a great fantasy season.
All right. Well, what about penny stocks? We talked early round, we talked mid round. Let's go late round. Give me 1 or 2 late round lottery tickets that you think could blow.
Robbie Anderson on the Jets. So, the Jets, their offense is, not prolific, but, we saw last year with the Browns, with Terrell Pryor, a big wide receiver that, feasted in games where, the team was losing by a lot of points. So you got the guy on the Jets. A lot of people are pinning Quincy Enunwa as that guy, to be the Jets' #1 wide receiver. But, if you look at the body type of Robbie Anderson, 6'1", he's got great speed, outside receiver. He showed a lot of flashes of, jump ball ability last year. I kind of talked about him, having a really good preseason, last year. So I think that Robbie Anderson's a guy, as long as he can stay out of trouble. He got arrested, I know, in the offseason, so that does always hurt. But I think that, he has that deep ball ability. So, even if you get him late, he ends up, catching one pass for a deep touchdown. He can help you late in drafts. I'm actually I target Robbie Anderson a lot in dynasty drafts because I think that he has a long-term potential to be, that, vertical wide receiver on the Jets moving forward.
The single most important move fantasy owners can make in 2017 that'll win them a title is ...
It's preached all around, but it's wait on a quarterback. Yeah, I mean, you gotta wait. It's like you have to, strap yourself back from, drafting. You see all those guys on the board. You see like Luck and Derek Carr and Dak Prescott, and you're just like, oh my God, I want those, this guy. But like I said, you can get guys so late. Look at Matt Ryan last year. That dude wasn't even drafted in half of leagues, and he ended up being the number 2 quarterback overall, and made those teams unstoppable because they hadn't taken quarterbacks till later. So just drafting a quarterback late, obviously depending on what the rules are in your league. If it's a 2 quarterback league, it changes. If especially and then if quarterbacks passing touchdowns are 6 points versus 4 points, it can change in both those ways. But I think waiting on a quarterback is the most important thing that you can do. I really only looked into Aaron Rodgers. He is one quarterback that I would definitely pay up to take. But besides Rodgers, wait on a quarterback. You can get so much value later in drafts.
We definitely subscribe to that mindset as well. All right, let's wrap things up. What's your boldest prediction for the fantasy season? And then after that, tell us real quick where people can find you on social media and stuff like that.
All right, cool. So my bold prediction is that Jay Ajayi will lead the NFL in rushing yards. And you can follow me in more of my stats and stuff, my articles that I post at Andrew Erickson _ on Twitter, and I'm on GridironExperts.com.
Awesome.
Awesome.
It's been great
Thanks
having
so
you.
much for your time.
Fantasy Wolf number 3, Andrew Erickson. Thanks for being here, buddy.